Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to our second edition of the Human Rights Festival 2.0. We are so excited to have you all here to participate in our second edition of the Human Rights Festival. A little background of why we commemorating this day. It's the UN International Day in support of victims of torture. June 26 marks the moment in 1987 when the UN Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, one of the key instruments in fighting torture, came into effect. For the past years, Women's Association for Victims Empowerment, WAVE, has been working with victims of torture, cross-cutting through the different thematic areas of the TRRC, ranging from the witch hunt victims, victims of GBV, and other violations. So, as we did it last year, we continue to do it this year. And and following the presidential election that led to the ouster of the former president Yahya Jammeh in the government launched its transitional justice process, which included a Truth, Reparation and Reconciliation Commission (TRRC), established by an act of parliament. The TRRC was set to examine the human rights violation during the 22 years of dictatorial regime under the Yahya Jammeh regime. In 2021, the TRRC published its report findings and recommendations for the government to ensure justice, reparation, reconciliation, and national unity, among other measures. In its reports, the Commission revealed numerous human rights violations through the Truth-Seeking process, and its report recognized that various testimonies established that torture was customary for detainees in Jammeh's Gambia. Several women were subjected to sexualized torture. In May 2022, the government released its white paper in which its majority accepted the findings and recommendations of the TRRC. Since the release of this document, several victims of torture and other violations are still waiting for the satisfactory reparation, justice and accountability, and guarantees of no repetition. Over the past years, our work has been anchored on empowering victims of human rights violations to take the lead in quest to attain justice, redress, and legal reform that are linked to the transitional justice process in the Gambia. Part of our work including raising awareness about the lobbying for the enactment of the anti-torture bill, which has now successfully been passed into law. In March 2023, massive strides were released when the National Assembly passed into law the Prohibition and Prevention of Torture Act, a progressive forward-looking legislation to mark the new dispensation and space. To commemorate the progressive legislation and security sector reforms, WAVE intends to organize a human rights festival in commemorating of the International Day in support of victims of torture in partnership with different stakeholders. The objectives of this event is to this event will be the very first kind in the Gambia. The commemoration will serve as the reminder that torture is a crime and also give opportunities for people to unite and voice their opinions against. The event seeks to promote public awareness about the reason for the commemoration of June 26. It also aims at strengthening the participation of victims, stakeholders, and the general public in rallying support for the speedy implementation of the government's white paper. Enhance public awareness about the Anti-Torture Act 2023 and the significance of act in the new democratic dispensation and country to prevent torture. Support of victims, including through the provision of psychosocial support to aid in their healing process. Provide a platform for the popularizing the new anti-torture law and to kickstart the dialogue on the national reconciliation and peaceful coexistence. This is the reason why WAVE is commemorating June 26th to fight against torture, and we thank God that we have anti-torture bill that is fighting against torture in the Gambia. So I will say it in Mandinka. You all excuse my Mandinka and my Wolof. Just to Assalamu alaikum badim Mandinkolu ana kammelal dalilo mi atinam bijambi amba fulale ala baraka bake ala najango ani alle time minta pour ka futa jang dalilo mi en si jambi serung anga human rights festival kele nyinam fanam ba fulanjanna bawo nin ku kendo keta akadan si nyakiline nin ku kendo manke akadan si nyakiline banna aketa ku kendo len aka ka fulanjanne so wakama nyinam fanan ngata ba fulanjankan kana human rights festival oke dalilo mi atina human rights festival obe ke ka wala tilimbali yani tajirante mi alonko abe ke kan molla no the past 22 years wara jamela time oto tilimbali an mi alonko aketa ko dalilo le atina mbeñi lungo jura kan bawo nin ko tocho manke doron hadama dingo lipoti bare tocho yo fanna jamala soto o kamala tiara sila finding si atandi le ko tocho jamala keta jan tilimbali ya jamala keta jan ka bondi witch hunt la wala mol mi yalon ko yo tumi boyala musol mi yalon ko ye boyenka ane ku jamal mi yalon ko akata jar riji moñin kono o kamala wala ati nambe ñu lungo jura kan mbal nimbara la bake katanda la ko ala baraka alla nala suma mboki olof pour ñuy dégga suma olof bi waxu noonu waaye di leen dalal di leen wax ne jërë ngeen jëf si seen teewaay di leen wax ne bés bi last year defoon nañ suñ human rights festival bi mu doon loo xamante ne rafetul nañ ko bu baax moo tax this year tamit ñu ngi koo defaat di leen wax ne lu tax ñu ngee def lii nii moo nekk métit bi nga xam ne teg nañ ko doomi aadama mbaa doomi réew mi métit bi nga xam ne teg nañ ko si régime Jammeh bi loolu moo waral ñu ngi def bii nii waaye luwa bi dafa nekkoon 26 of June UN International Day in support of victims of torture ñoo nekk di dooleel ñoo xamante ne teg nañ leen métit mu waral ne Wave last year ñu start ko ñu def loolu noonu this year tamit mu waral ñu ñëwaat fii last year defoon nañ ko Bakadaji stakeholders this year tamit ñëwaat nañ Bakadaji pour defaat stakeholders di wane pour su boobaa victimes yi ñu ngi fi stakeholders yi ñu ngi fi ñu mun a seet lan la TRRC wax ak government bi bu mu jëlee white paper bi lan ak lan lañ si liggéey jërë ngeen jëf si seen teewaay di leen wax ne ngeen enjoy si yeneen yi yu war a ñëw tey jërë ngeen jëf yes sorry
Thank you very much, Mariama. I think now we all have an idea of why we're here. And before we move to the next agenda item, I'd like to recognize the efforts and the work of the staff of WAVE, what they've done so far. They started last year with limited funds, and again, they persisted to do another Human Rights Festival. So I think they deserve a round of applause. The next speaker is supposed to represent the donors. And like we all know, even our government needs support from development partners. And similarly, these activities would not be possible without the support of the donors. But unfortunately, he could not make it. So I'd just like us to kindly appreciate the support of these institutions, USAID, US government, IDLO, NED, NHRC, State of Mike, and Freedom House, whose support really helped in ensuring that we are able to have these activities that started last Saturday, and we have today's stakeholder convergence, and on Saturday again we'd have a victim town hall, regional victim town hall at Janjambure. So can we kindly acknowledge the support of the donor partners that help to ensure and strengthen all the CSOs that are working within the transitional justice space. With that, I'd like to invite the representative of the Solicitor General, Ms. Marie Mendy, to give a statement, opening statement on behalf of the Ministry of Justice.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed partners. I stand here this evening to deliver this opening statement on behalf of the Solicitor General and Legal Secretary. Welcome to the second edition of the Gambia Human Rights Festival and the commemoration of the International Day in support of victims of torture. It is both an honor and privilege to stand before you today as we reaffirm our unwavering commitment to eradicating torture and upholding the principles of human dignity, justice, and compassion. On December 12, 1997, the United Nations General Assembly designated June 26 as the International Day in support of victims of torture. This day underscores the universal condemnation of torture and highlights the crucial importance of enforcing the Convention Against Torture. The Gambia's ratification of this convention and the enactment of the anti-torture legislation in 2023 were monumental steps in our nation's journey towards a society free from the scourge of torture. Today, we gather not only to commemorate this significant day, but also to celebrate our collective progress and to renew our resolve in the fight against torture. The theme for this year, strengthen partnerships and collective action to combat torture and support victims, captures the essence of this mission. It reminds us that not only through unity, collaboration, and unwavering dedication can we make a lasting impact. Our journey towards a world without torture is ongoing, and the challenges we face are formidable. Despite the clear prohibition of torture under international law, it continues to be practiced in many parts of the world, often justified under the guise of national security. This festival and commemoration serve as a platform to raise awareness, educate the public, and inspire action to combat these injustices. I therefore take this opportunity to commend WAVE for their enriching lineup of events designed to engage, educate, and empower. From art exhibitions, which use the power of art to heal and raise awareness, to the family-friendly fun day offering rich mental and psychosocial support. WAVE has shown its dedication to reaching diverse audiences, and we commend them for this initiative. The Stakeholders Convergence and panel discussions will provide a critical space for dialogue and advocacy, focusing on ending impunity and ensuring accountability. This special commemoration in Janjambure will honor the resilience and courage of torture survivors, celebrating their stories through cultural expressions. Let us use this occasion to remember the victims of torture, honor their strength, and commit ourselves to building a future where torture is eradicated and justice prevails. The government has made significant strides to ensure accountability for all crimes committed during the former regime. The Special Accountability Mechanism Act and the Special Prosecutor's Office Act are two significant legislations that highlight the government's commitment to attaining justice for victims. A few weeks ago, the ECOWAS Commission convened an ECOWAS expert meeting in the Gambia to consider the draft statute of the Special Tribunal for the Gambia. This meeting was a precursor to the ultimate goal, which is the endorsement by the ECOWAS heads of state of the ECOWAS statute for the establishment of the Special Tribunal for the Gambia. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can foster a culture of empathy, justice, and compassion. Welcome to the second edition of the Gambia Human Rights Festival and the commemoration of the International Day in support of victims of torture. I thank you all. Thank you. Sorry, forgive me.
Thank you so much for sharing your work on the Ministry of Justice. In the interest of time, I'll just call for this moderation of the first panel discussion. Like I mentioned, we celebrated or commemorated the last year, and we're very excited about the enactment of the Commission of Agriculture package. We've had a TRRC, we've seen what has happened, but the next step as a country, the next step when it comes to transitional justice, or one of the steps, is about accountability. We all agree in this room that justice looks different for different or various people or various victims, right? And as a country, we have been taking steps, or the ministry has been taking steps together with other stakeholders to come up with mechanisms to ensure that perpetrators are held accountable for their actions. So today's discussions or panel conversation would be around that. When we talk about accountability, what do we mean? What would it look like for the Gambia? How would we go about it? Why accountability? Because you can talk to someone on the street and then they will tell you that, oh, we've already gone through the TRRC, we've seen what has happened, let's move on. But not everybody can move on without getting the justice that they deserve. Not everybody can move on without healing or having the closure that they need. So like I said, today's discussion is very apt and it's very commendable, and I think we have very good individuals on the various panels to talk to us about this. So Ms. Mariama Jakeba Sise, she's the moderator for the first panel discussion. I would invite you to come up and then invite the other members of your panel to discuss about this. In the interest of time, I think you have only 30 minutes, so I'll be very strict on that. Thank you.
Flex.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if it's Thank you very much, Yami, for that introduction. So I'm going to be inviting the other members of my panel, who will be part of my panel today. We have Ms. Bintu Jaite from the National Human Rights Commission. Please join the table. We have Ms. Jokuna Suso and and we also have Mr. Abdullahi Bojan from Jambo. Thank you. Come. No, you can sit here. All right, fine. Thank you very much. Thank you once again for everyone who took time to come here. So We're going to start the panel discussion, and our discussion is going to be focused on why and whom. When we talk about accountability, why do we talk about accountability in the first place? And whom is this accountability for? And we have two victims here, one by my right and one by my left. I'm going to start with Mr. Bojan for the interest of time. We're just going to delve into the discussions. Mr. Bojan is from a community in Jambo who have gone through a series of human rights violations, witch hunts, and torture is a cross-cutting issue which most of these victims has experienced. So when we talk about accountability, what does it mean for them? What does it mean for these victims? So Mr. Bojang, we are going to start with you. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Good evening, all the listeners here. I am sorry, my voice are not very much regular today. However, accountability, I think, is to the interest of the victims and government in particular. In the last 22 years, people have suffered a lot. I'm talking of the victims. Now, accountability, one could consider it as the end result of an obligation. You cannot have accountability without the responsibility of a sector or an individual. Victims on this day, I think they have a big smile on their faces. Women suffered a lot during the last 22 years. People suffered. People were victimized. Perpetrators were on their own, acting on the directives of the government. I think having this day today on a commemoration of June 26, I think that will put a big smile on the faces of the victims. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bojan. So for the people of Jambo, for example, and other victims, because you talked about it being the end result of an obligation and responsibility of the state, what kind of accountability are you looking at? What does it really mean for those women who has gone through a lot, those victims who has passed away? Last year we were here and we have some of the victims who were present here, but this year they are not even here. What would accountability look like for these women?
I think, first of all, the government has to consider that victims are of different status. There are victims, they only wanted to see to it that justice has taken place. They don't care to have reparations. Other victims, majority of the victims wanted to have the reparations. Most of them, a lady told me some time ago that they were renting. The breadwinner, that's the husband, they passed away. They cannot be able to pay the rent. People cannot be able to get their ends meet together. Orphans left the schools because their parents cannot be able to afford the welfare of their schooling. And all is because of the reparations that have been delayed. What we expect government to do is to make sure that justice prevails. Like I said, others would not like to have reparations. All they wanted to have is to have justice for the perpetrators to be prosecuted. This is what they have. But there are a lot more who are helpless at their corners without having any support from the government, because the reparation that was mentioned by the TRRC is been delayed for long. Victims have been waiting. Most of them have died. In our community, we have nearly 23 victims, now 24. who had passed away without having justice in their favor. Another victim that I spoke to not long ago, their condition was very serious. This guy, both him and his father, were taken to mile 2 because of government's directives, and it was against their right. The father was locked at prisons number 2, remand wing number 2, cell number 2, and the father was at cell number 11. Now, when the TRRC was set up, the investigators went out to take statements from them. The father passed away. The son was able to give out his statement. The younger brother who took the statement of the father cannot be able to express himself. The father was not considered. Government has to look into all those things. We can understand that about 2,600 victims were screened. Only 1,009 victims were considered. 1,591 victims were not considered. Government has to check on that. Although TRRC, they did their best to screen the victims, but there are some oversights that I expect the investigators to get back to those guys so that they can be able to capture the real victims who were affected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr.
My voice is not good today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bojan, for that elaborative demands, and considering everything that the victims are going through and are going through. From the numbers you indicated that we've lost 24 victims as at now from the TRRC to date. So this actually calls for action for the government to implement all of these recommendations. We understand that a lot of things are going, but the pace in which the victims want it to go, we hope everything goes according to how they envision it to be. Right here, we have Ms. Shukran. I know most of us who are sitting here know who she is. She was at the TRRC, and we all heard her story, what happened to her in the NIA, and all the violations she has, and the abuses that was meted on her. So we just want to talk about, when we talk about accountability, why are we even talking about it in the first place? Why is it so necessary? What does it look like for women who have experienced similar violations like she has experienced? She'll be speaking in Mandinka, and I'm going to help her to translate in English for those who do not really understand Mandinka. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Nomol be konton jamangi suto ularola kabirin ko ina fokato be mo be konton na musol to yala musol men yalon ko isofata ibatata itorata Gambia musol nga Gambia musol men batata itorata men yala men mo victimol mbole na place to jang kadon tel victimol batata back ika for 22 years 29 years long kala 22 years mu ya jame jamanol 7 years on ya kafa makata 2090 mbe jarabo ko ntel musol ndorata back ye muso do rep ye muso do kenson londi ye muso do ke manuel fa ye muso do men yalon ko muso ye tora nyame yalon ko alanta tambita muso do fata imam fem kabri fata kata bula bila kuma man foje kuma ki jeto mo man na ya fo moy ko hakko tunye bari wa fati yararsi ndebe ti yararsi tendula mbeni associationol be tendula kat embe be tendula kadu ni ajente be ko dol na fo mena sila jambe diyamula wolle ya sab wolle entel nyaayelendi na danda masa kunda entel nyaaba tar sorandi entel jere kala kadu entel bi fo entel jambi na niyo ku yata bak kadu ministre janta tar janne ni ministre man tar jam permanent secretary janta tar janne aman tar jam aru nyanda na kumo folo wala mo la kina men na ka ina tan la diamo kana dan tella kuoto pour ka ya mo fo ke la mon tella o do min te man le muta moti ni muta moti nu nga jarabo menke nga toro menke kala siri ngana ko mo fo kibaro faya sama president menke da adama baroti kabien tel bula lumen ntadan ci dan ni adama sira adama ko ni ala so dama musol nyambal nya fi dalal bar tel nyama fi dade musol be batari musol men yalon ko ke manol fata dingul bije karambujo ima soto no pour que karambujo no dimulye ibe torali ni fundi de ka fo en ko fo mun be ko la nyinto fente bo la nyinto ibe luwaso la ila luwasi jo fo ma soto no mo ke bondi la ko dal kono ko bitri mo le mot ika vatel be mun soto la nyinto ale mun soto je man fe nyini je mo na nganya ka fo ndam bitri mo na nganya wala o man ke mo la titarlante memu doro ndu daggara bo men ko fo ngafo musoli yeke bu balti jang wala bele kata jamu nyem bakunka fe mam folje musol torada musol ngay beta musol batata dole bi jedo ni dara wafiru ni men na yoke ikela dimbal barundi wori oto ikafo men na ko white paper nde ma white paper je folode white paper nyanta nala menna kanna nyanto dinna kafa ko kandi so nyabi wodonde e kuoti modol be kurandi nyante jarala dole nyajal meji jar i kurantal dole fata no ko ndey fata di musulu la wala soto di musulu lo di kilo banta di musu nano bije mo na menta mo no ko jube kafa ko adi fata le mara di mbar jube far kamar be kurandi mo ko de fe ga to ni suka da ba fata adi ngul bije alsi mira kafa ko bitim ya man ke nganya rayat biti ya mu menti yitora te ngay beta bankol kan ni bitim mol bijeto ikela nyanto dilal kela nyanto dilal ka fala mutako ni bitim mol fara mu molati oto me mobe tentula me mobe jambe busire musol le jang musol me torari ibe ngay bere ike manuel fara do bije fana futo fa imanke fa sodo no ibe jara bi di mulla ko wala dinul men yalon ko be fama fale mamme baba muna fono la fama la kuoto woto fe fono la fama la kuoto oto masakunda entel jube nka nyimme foten nka kila ki masakunda entel jube ay nyin ko ye fe kuta nyin kuoto white paper kula nyanta tala je ko senea na sena da lew bitimo la nyanto kadila kela fe ko to dum kela ju so nyabi ye men ye ku kela kata ka fo yamfe kamol jara meni man dula sodo iman sakunda nyanta lola ye fereke wol be dula sodo la be tarla dame bar fe mu ka fojeto hal sabar doron ni al sonta abe sol fulal fo watu juma ministre ngata tarajande ba men secrétaire ngata tarajam man tarajang sa nga diamu nta be diamu kala associational ba sa fulal na masakunda bar ku da bolaje ni ku be bolaje ni ku me da 7 years 4 years basila ku kilim mol men yalan ko yetu du kan son londi ke son kelo ni musol kanana keto ra mai tu keto la enaye ka ko be kela ila wululal be fata musol men yalan ko ke manyor fata al sini ini dum le basiri oto ali ka ku e fanyin ku oto na be fo ka kan juso kan di bakale ministre men kina men wala ministre of justice ntagende ministre of justice ngalong wala mbata mbatuti kabira bijang ni e bitim center sinyanan na be benati woto nin kume mbo nyama yafo ministre ko ayen kala muta president ada mbaro ayen kala muta na rajane serum ngo bat fenge ko baba liye ko mbe kila president ka aya fa ma fa malo baba en secretary basirin ka mbe kila president ka aya fa ma fa malo ministre na mi wala janni sa da kilo do koteke aya fa ma fa malo sa intel falu bay television wala nyiti da fundi teleto ya tan ko bitimol ko nyim bitim ya man ke nganya ranti amanka titarlanti mo wala mu moti tiara si ko senande lew safana mamaaji abe ko rin fer ni tele nana yana kayto nyin findi mu to dum tiara si modu no dilati mbe mo be konton nambe do wala be ni diam ta sai ikatale te da ya dani ni mom mo tan da dani ko te ko mo faale nyanta men fola mba fola muso lenki wala mbula mbe fola ngaf ala baraka.
Thank you so much, for that powerful statement. Really powerful. I'm going to allow Mr. Bojan to do justice to what she has said right now, so everyone in the room will understand exactly what she has said, because that was
very sad narratives. However, I'll try to come up with all what he had said, or some of what he just had said. Number one, it was a big failure. The justice minister didn't show up, and the PAM secretary. And so many recommendations were made on the white paper. She said she didn't take that story because it is not even 22 years. It's about 29 years now. 22 years plus 7 years on this new dispensation, still nothing moves on. Things are very slow. That's what she was emphasizing, that women suffered. Some were raped, some were nakedly positioned, some were abused, all sorts of abuse they went through. And most of them are on rent. They are renting at the facilities that they are staying. And their breadwinners had passed away. That is their husbands or brothers or whatever that they stayed with. That government should make an effort to ensure that TRRC recommendations are implemented to the latter. That's it.
Thank you so much. Just to emphasize, from what Mr. Boyan has said, Mr. We should now also emphasize on the need for scholarship for the kids of victims who have suffered a lot during the last 22 years. That's right where they stay in, their source of living they don't even have, and their kids don't even have access to quality education. So all of this is what accountability looks like for them, an acknowledgement of the state. Also, that the permanent secretary, as Mr. Bojan has said, and other people who have influential roles to play ought to be here. And when they see this clip, they should be able to take actions towards and acknowledge the suffering of all of the victims. So I'm going to move to Ms. Bintu Jaite. We are way behind time. I think we have 10 minutes to conclude. So Ms. Bintu is from the NHRC, and she's going to be talking from the angle of the state and the role of the NHRC in monitoring all the recommendations of the white paper and the TRC, and also to ensure that the rights of Gambians are protected. Thank you, Ms. Bintu.
You're basically giving up
10 minutes, and we conclude.
That's fine. Good afternoon.
Okay. Is it okay? Right. Okay, good evening, beautiful ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bintu Jaite, as she rightly mentioned. I work with the National Human Rights Commission. Just to say that we are pleased as an institution to be associated with this very important occasion of commemoration of the International Day in support of victims of torture, to also reiterate our never-ending support during this transitional justice that we as a country. So like she said, in order to keep it short, I'll basically try to answer the questions in relation to accountability. When we talk about accountability, whom are we holding, whom is it for? That's the question that I was given, which is to, for whom and why, right? Who are we ensuring accountability for, and why do we need accountability? So just to state that when we talk about accountability, you know, we have to understand that this is a very important pillar of the transitional justice process that we are undergoing as a country. It is important because this is that, do we get justice? You know, what is that route that we take in order to get justice as a country, as victims, as survivors? Of course, this is in relation to the acts of torture, because that is why we're here today. When we talk about accountability, again, a lot of words or a lot of terms come to mind, and these include, you know, culpability, answerability,
accounting of one's actions, being called to answer for one's actions, responsibility, that is taking responsibility for one's actions, etc., etc. So like I've said, and it takes different forms. So it is a very important pillar of the whole transitional justice process. Now, answering the question for whom, of course, we all know or understand that the need to account, to hold perpetrators accountable is, of course, for victims of torture, right? For victims of human rights violation, but since this is a specific issue that we're dealing with, it is for victims of torture, victims who were subjected to degrading and inhuman treatment, right, by state officials or its agents. So accountable for. When we recount events that happened, when we talk about what we went through as a nation, when we talk about what our loved ones went through by the previous regime, when we recall how our fathers were treated, how our uncles had, disappeared, how our families cried in the arms of officials, we are working towards accountability, because that is the collection of events, which is the first step that we actually have to undergo in order to ensure accountability. So we're doing all of this so that the victims and the survivors would get justice. This is why accountability is important, because they have been wronged, they have been hurt, they have been subjected to degrading inhuman punishment, and they need for the perpetrators to be held accountable for those actions. And also not only for victims, really, and survivors, but as a country, as a nation, we need accountability. Why do we need this? Because we as a country even need closure, right? We need to heal. We need to be reformed. And that, I believe, is the crux of the matter. Because when these violations happened over time, it was embedded in our system so much that it does not go away overnight. Now, most of the human rights, we could say that, it has reduced to a large extent. But then, as a country, in order for us to move ahead, we have to ensure accountability for various reasons, which I would actually discuss when I talk about the next question, which is why. So accountability is really important for the victims, but for the country at large. Now, moving to the next question, because I see Mariam here looking at me. Moving to the next question, which is why accountability? Why the need for accountability? Just like I've said, when we talk about accountability, we're looking at that route that would lead to justice. So accountability really means a lot of things to the victims and survivors, and different things. For some victims, accountability may mean perpetrators being punished for what they had done. For other victims, accountability could mean that the state creates a system or take measures to ensure that these things don't happen again. And then for other victims and survivors, accountability may mean or means reparations. And we all know reparations take a lot of forms. Could be monetary, could be by way of apology, could be by way of acknowledgement by the state, which I believe plays a very crucial aspect in the whole transitional justice process, because we've just heard one of the victims here talk about why the state, for example, hasn't, does not have, a higher level personnel here, right? It speaks to the need for the victims to be acknowledged by the state. So, I'm just pointing to the fact that accountability means different things to different victims and survivors. So we must also take this into consideration when we talk about why we need accountability, all right? So moving on, I believe, there are various reasons why accountability is very important. And one of this, for example, is protection from inhuman and degrading punishment. I'm trying to be specific to the issue of torture here, which in summary, is that definition. It's an inhuman and degrading punishment. Of course, the definition goes further when you look at the law itself, but just to summarize, it is an inhuman and degrading punishment. So when we talk about accountability, we are looking for protection from inhuman and degrading punishment. How does this happen? When the state, for example, make reforms, it is ensuring that we are being protected from torture happening again. And then we have the issue of non-occurrence, for example. I just said that for some victims and survivors, accountability means the state coming up with concrete measures to ensure that these acts do not happen again. And that speaks to the issue of non-occurrence. So you will also bear with me that during the whole transitional justice process, a very popular slogan that has been used is the never again slogan, right? This slogan indicates that we as a country are going through a process so that the atrocities that had been happening during the 22 regime of Jammeh does not happen again. So when we talk about accountability, that is one of the reasons why, so that these things do not happen again, right? Our fathers, our mothers, our grandparents, or our uncles might have gone through that phase, but we want to ensure accountability so that we and generations yet unborn do not have to go through what we went through. We also talk about, legal obligation, right? Why do we need accountability? Of course, legal obligation in the sense that when we have a legal obligation being recognized or in place, it means then that the state has an obligation to prevent us, the Gambians, from torture, right? And that is by way of, for example, having the Torture Act. We will recall that previously we did not have any legislation nationally that actually spoke to the issue of torture or criminalized torture. And that is one of the, one of the obstacles, for example, we're going to face as a nation when it comes to the issue of prosecuting perpetrators, for example, right? Because of the non-retroactive nature of acts of torture. So having that legal obligation in place to ensure that the state prevents its citizens or people in the Gambia from torture is a very important issue and answers the question why. Also, of course, to prevent impunity, because when we don't have measures in place, legal frameworks in place, it is very, very easy for impunity to prevail in any country. And this has been seen in various countries where transitional justice has taken place due to the type of regime that they had before, whether it is a dictatorial regime, a military regime, etc., right? We also have, I also noted the need to maintain a culture of human rights. Answering the question, why do we need accountability? We need accountability to ensure that the culture of human rights in the Gambia is maintained. Because when the state respects the fundamental human rights of individuals, then accountability is ensured, because there would be proper mechanisms in place to ensure that human rights is respected, but that it is a culture, okay? Second to last, of course, I talked about legislative reforms. Why we need accountability, of course, speaks to the issue of legislative reforms, because in order to account for certain acts, there is the need to have proper laws, policies, regulations in place to serve as a guide, but also to ensure that there are legal entitlements that individuals can actually rely on to get remedies. Because if we do not have laws, and laws are not effective, or there are no policies in place, it is difficult for you to invoke a certain right that a law gives you. So it actually is very important to have laws and policies in place, which actually gives you and I that right to actually approach a court, for example, and demand that your right be respected as an individual, as a victim, as a survivor of torture. Lastly is the issue of institutional reforms, right? Why we need accountability is so that we have, institutional reforms. So you would agree with me that one of the, again, most popular discussion that we had been having throughout the transitional justice process is the use of our institutions by the then regime as a tool for violating human rights of individuals. We have the NIA, for example, whereas it was supposed to be an agency or an institution that actually protects the right of individuals by ensuring safety, for example, in terms of intelligence services, it was turned into something else, right? So we have other institutions also. When we talk about torture, these are acts that are normally performed by state officials or state agencies, right? And the junglers, for example, we have the army, for example, or all individuals who were officials, and from certain institutions who were used, to perpetuate all of these atrocities. So, and their institutions, so because they're institutions, it's difficult for them to move away from certain practices because it becomes a habit that becomes the norm. We believe what we do is the correct thing and how we do it is the correct thing. So ensuring accountability really ensures that there is institutional reform so that we move from the past, we're able to heal, but fundamentally that we maintain a human rights culture such that our institutions are used for their proper mandate, but not used for specific purposes. So in terms of torture, really, there is the need to take a holistic approach, and these are what I've just highlighted in terms of answering the question, why accountability? Just lastly to say that in order for us to ensure accountability, victims and survivors really need to be placed at the top of the agenda because they only know how they feel and where they feel it most. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you on behalf of victims and survivors here. And we understand the need and the necessity why they need to be part of all of this reform process and all of these things we stated. So I would say thank you, my panelists, Mr. Bota and Ms. Jokula and Victor. Thank you everyone for listening.
Should have given her 1 hour.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very, very, very.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ize. I think they deserve another round of applause. Like I said, conversations like this is very important to get the perspective of the victims because they say he who feels it knows it. So, and we can't talk about accountability if we don't hear from the victims, we don't know what they're going through. After that, poetry break, and I'd like to invite Mr. Kausu OCC, yes, to just, lighten up the mood a little bit before we go to the second panel discussion.
Just a quick announcement. Everybody, this mic is the most important mic.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kausu Processing, a youth advocate with WAVE. I'm here to recite a poem entitled 22 Years of Rule. 22 years of rule, the land of my country has been in grave. The smiling coals have turned to crying coals. Land of justice have turned to injustice. Innocent victims were violated. Fundamental human right has been violated. 22 years of rule is a region of sadness, not happiness. Innocent victims that have love for their country. They were fighting for the voiceless people so that their voice could. Today is a day to celebrate all these amazing victims. They came outside to discuss what they went through in these 22 years or so. My Gambian people are proud of you. To all the victims that lost their life in order to fight for justice, my Gambian people are proud of you. Hashtag never again in my country. Alami alay motanka ni mansa kunda sifal bula ni Gambia to. Yenna yala musal sifosom wulbi isun Gambia. Ya Allah ya gandami ko sifa government ko Gambia. Thank you for your kind attention. Let me take it. Yeah, okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Klausu OCC, a youth advocate with WAVE. I'm here to recite a poem entitled 22 Years of Rule. 22 years of rule, the land of my country has been in grief. The smiling coals have turned to crying coals. Land of justice have turned to injustice. Innocent victims lost their life. Fundamental human rights has been violated. Innocent victims that have love for their country, that we are fighting for the voiceless people, so their voice to be heard, lost their life. Today is the day to celebrate all these amazing victims that came outside to discuss what they went through in these 22 years of rule. My Gambian people are proud of you. Today is the day to celebrate all those victims that lost their life in order to fight for justice. My Gambian people are proud of you. Hashtag never again in my country. Alami alay motanka ni mansa kunda sifal mulanyin Gambia. Yenna yala musal sifosom wulbi isun Gambia. Ya Allah Allah dandame ko sifa government ko Gambia. Thank you for your kind attention.
Like I said, we talked about accountability. How?
You're forgetting the most important one.
How will that look like for the Gambia, right? When we're talking about how would we hold the perpetrators accountable for their actions? Because for some of us, we still don't want to see them in the same streets as us. We at least want to see something done so that when we go to bed, we can sleep at night and know that we have received some sort of compensation or some sort of closure of the acts that had happened to us. So I'll invite the moderator for the second panel, Mr. Imran Dabo, to come and invite his panelists to discuss accountability and how that would look like for the Gambia.
Before I start, I'd like to say that I think, given our experiences of the last 30 years, it is only fitting today that we are here commemorating this day in commemoration of victims of torture. And we would, I think, all thank WAVE for this brilliant initiative. I'll call out my panelists. I will start with Mr. Finyang from the Ministry of Justice, legal consultant for the MOJ Post RRC unit. Hello, good evening. Also, Madam Hannah Foster, who is Executive Director, the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, as well as Ms. Lindsay Bailey, Staff Attorney at the Center for Justice and Accountability. And the final panelist, Mr. Alfred Hill, who is the Field Program Manager at the International Development Law Organization, the Gambia. Oh. So I'm going to pass out. Okay. May I just ask how long I have for the panel?
How long for the panel? Nobody's saying so.
Okay, so I'll help myself to an hour. Thank you very much. And this panel, of course, is building on from the previous one that we just had talking about the why and for whom accountability is. But I think we are going to be talking about the how, but learning, or at least building on from what we've heard from the first panel. I think there are certain things that we can learn from and build on, which is that we can see from the discussions and the statements of the victims that not only are perpetrators willing or are ready to commit acts of torture and human rights violations in various different forms. We've heard about witch huntings here and other forms of torture, but also that they will do anything they can to find means of getting away with it, including, of course, seeking asylum in other jurisdictions and various other things. So in that sense then, and also we can draw from that they also do leave victims with shattered lives in very different forms for regaining or being given back their dignity. So accountability, of course, then we know is really critical. But how do we provide this accountability? And I think given the different scenarios that I've mentioned and the fact that perpetrators can find ways of trying to get away with it, the mechanisms for accountability have now expanded really impressively, I think, and we will be discussing that with the panel today. But we can say that there's regional mechanisms that are available, there are national mechanisms, and there are international mechanisms. And we will hopefully draw lessons on how these mechanisms can be used to enhance or to provide accountability for victims and also address impunity. I would start with Ms. Safinyang, who is representing the Ministry of Justice here. And I would just perhaps request you to discuss a little bit with us about the national mechanisms that are available. Of course, we've had the TRRC already, but we also have other mechanisms. We have the Torture Act that is now law. We have the National Human Rights Commission and other mechanisms. How do these mechanisms move us towards accountability, and how can they be used in a timely manner to ensure that the victims get the kind of accountability that they expect? And when I say victims here, I mean even the national, the nation as a whole as well. Because, of course, the maxim goes, justice delayed is justice denied. And so hopefully you can help us discuss this. Thanks.
Where do I put it? What with it?
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. maa ngi nuyu victims yu fi nekk ak ñi jël seen time yëpp pour ñëw witness xewaay bii nii defoon nañ ko daaw ñu sant yàlla ne fekkee nañ ko tey tamit and to also express apologies on behalf of the Solicitor General. In fact, I left him at the office when I was coming here. I came from Emoji and I left him at the office, and that is why he is being deputized by the registrar of the Ministry of Justice. So once again, just to apologize for the absence of the Solicitor General, but he was unable to come due to other pressing matters. Not that he didn't want to come, but I left him at the office working on other matters as well. So for the purpose of today, we'll be talking about accountability. And when we talk about accountability, generally we talk about justice and accountability. And I will be taking you through what the Gambia is doing, what we have in the works as far as justice and accountability is concerned. So just to go back a little bit, we spoke about the TRRC. We all saw what happened during that time. And please, if I say something that you want me to clarify, you can raise your hand and I would take it again. Or if you want me to say it in a different language, I wouldn't mind also doing that. Feel free to stop me at any point in time. So the TRRC had their sittings and they came up with recommendations. So as far as justice and accountability is concerned, the TRRC gave recommendations, and what happened at the TRRC was more of fact-finding, trying to find out the truth. That is the truth-seeking aspect of the transitional justice journey. So now we have the truth. What do you do with it? So after the report was published, the government took a policy decision that we were going to carry out prosecutions, because there were recommendations for certain individuals, actually quite a number, to be prosecuted. But then having the right legal framework is very important if you want to prosecute. So where were we at the time? Remember, when, since we're talking about torture today, when most of the acts of torture were perpetrated, at the time, we did not have a local law that was prohibiting torture. Although torture has always been, part of custom, but Gambia did not have a specific law on torture. So I believe Imran can, I'm a bit bad with dates, but we ratified the convention, I think, in 2018 after Jammeh left. We also need to understand the context that in a dictatorship, generally, dictators don't want to be held accountable. And if you're operating in a system where, it's the state perpetuating certain things, they take steps to sort of protect themselves. Because there was a time, you would recall, that Jammeh decided he was going to remove the Gambia. We were no longer going to be part of the ICC. But it was after the new government came in that we took steps to ensure that we returned smoothly. So at the time, we did not have a law on torture. But acts of torture happened. We all know that acts of torture happened, and we cannot deny that acts of torture happened. And it happened in state institutions. These are facts that we all need to, accept. And the TRRC showed, we all saw it, that, acts of torture were being carried out at the NIA, at prisons, at, prison office and other detention centers. So we needed to have a framework that will, in a way, be able to holistically approach justice and accountability. And by that, we mean, when we're talking about looking at criminal prosecutions, if you want to carry it out in a way where you have your legal, current legal framework is lacking, you need to be do it in a way that you would have at least some international law in it. So normally what people would do is maybe they would refer cases to the ICC, or they would design an accountability mechanism. So what we did as a government was to design a special accountability mechanism, and we call it SAM for short. So the special accountability mechanism is basically looking at having some cases that we know we can prosecute locally. So we have a special division at the High Court where we will prosecute those cases. But we have some type of cases, like, for example, certain acts of torture. And we also have some cases like some of the, incidents of the witch hunt and some of other incidents that, like the HIV treatment. It would be very difficult for you to adequately charge someone under the laws we have in Gambia. So the domestic framework will not be adequate. So you need to have a form of like an international tribunal that will have the power to apply international law, because, like I said, torture and some of these other offenses that we believe happened in Gambia were already prohibited under international law, like under customary international law. But we didn't have the local laws to prosecute them. So you need to have that hybrid system where you sort of mix international law with your local laws, and then you set up a tribunal to ensure that you do the prosecution. So we've been working on that. We have passed 2 key legislations, which is the Special Prosecutor's Office. Because what happened was when the TRRC made their recommendations that certain people should be prosecuted, we decided to set up a special prosecutor's office because there are some recommendations that have to do with exhuming the burial sites were not could not be adequately identified due to time constraints during the TRRC. So the special prosecutor is going to be an office that will have both the power to investigate and then they would be doing the prosecutions. The reason why is we want it to be independent. If you want the prosecutions to be respected and recognized, it has to be not only be independent, but seen to be independent. So the Special Prosecutor's Office has been created by an Act of Parliament, and that office would be independent, which means nobody would interfere with their work. They would not be under the office of the Attorney General, they would not be under the office of the President, they would be an independent office that would be carrying out their mandate. And their mandate is to prosecute cases of crimes that happened in the Gambia between July 1994 and January 2017. So that's the work of the special prosecutor. But if the special prosecutor prepares a case, he needs to take it to a court where it can be heard. So, like I said, we have some cases that we know, like with Yankuba Toure, he was charged in Gambia. Some cases we know we can, easily use our domestic framework, use our laws, and then go to High Court, Banjul, or somewhere and file those cases. So the special prosecutor will have two avenues. He can file cases in the High Court, but the complex cases, the ones that, maybe the people involved were high-ranking officials, the people that maybe were committing the acts of torture, or where it's suspected to be crimes against humanity, those people would be prosecuted at the special tribunal, which we're creating specifically for this purpose. And how are we creating it? We're doing it in partnership with ECOWAS, and that process has taken, significant measures and significant steps have been taken because a committee was constituted. They were working extremely hard at it, trying to make sure that the process is expedited. And that committee has developed their draft statute, and that draft statute had to be considered not only by Gambia, but all ECOWAS lawyers from ECOWAS member states. So we had the experts meeting. Now we're going to have different steps and stages. Like we said, these things they take time. It's a process. So I can say that at least most of the work, majority of the work has been done as far as the special tribunal is concerned. So the last bit would be for the ECOWAS heads of states to take a decision on it. And once they take a decision and agree, then the special tribunal would we would have the legal instrument to put it in place. And the special tribunal would be that court that will hear some of the cases. And we did it in a way that we factored our context, taking into consideration the fact that the tribunal would be empowered. The tribunal would be empowered to sit outside the Gambia if the need arises. If in the event that it may not be too suitable for it to sit here, it may sit outside of the Gambia. So the special tribunal would be that, it's going to be the main pillar of our accountability program, because that is where we will be filing cases, and the special division of the High Court also would be a place where cases can be filed, but using the domestic legal framework. The reason why we did that is to ensure that it is swift. We just didn't want to confine everything to the special tribunal. The whole idea is because we've heard, that every time I think I've become quite a familiar face. I've been coming to most of the engagements, and the message has always been the process needs to be expedited. And we're trying as much as possible to ensure that it is done in an expedited manner, but also not to compromise the standards as well, because it's very important to ensure that the right processes are carried out and the right measures are put in place, so that at the end of the day, once you start prosecuting, you ensure that you will not have any legal hurdles. I just want to wrap up, finally, Imran, by saying that generally accountability is very different from other forms of the TJ mechanisms, and it's technical, and sometimes victims usually feel like they're not completely a part of it, but there are other aspects that you could work on. Like when it comes to reparations, it's a wholesome process, and it's entirely victim focused, and victims have a lot of they would participate greatly in it. But when it comes to accountability, basically the special prosecutor would be deciding based on the quality of the evidence and what he has, how he will be filing the cases and where he will be filing it and what he will be filing. So just to say that work is actually actively being done in this regard, and we understand when victims say that it could be faster, but at times it can be very challenging from the you know it can be challenging. That's what I can say. But I just want to assure you that work is being done. Work is being done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sadiq. I think that was a really fair presentation. I think, this small one. Right. So just building on from where you left off, you've mentioned the collaboration with the sub-regional ECOWAS body, of course, in terms of setting up or how you or the state is approaching accountability. I'll just move on to Madam Foster. How those the involvement of the sub-regional institution help in terms of accountability, but also how does civil society organizations contribute to ensure accountability goes the right way?
national partners, but also continue to engage and identify international partners that can continue to support. We have, this is just talk about what CJA does. Had CJA not been available to be able to help support some of the issues, including cases from my own home country, perhaps some of the processes we've seen come true will not have come true. But permit me to just share one or two points before we bring this to a close. And I just want to touch on the process. I think as part of the how, one of the things that we've seen lacking, and it goes back to the issue of lack of interest, is that as our colleague from MOJ spoke about it, is that this is a detailed process, and particularly in countries that do not have the requisite legal framework, those processes needs to be put in place. But I think what needs to come along with that is a robust public awareness, so that victims, families, and other actors who have kept an eye on the process do not get lost and do not think that nothing is happening. So irregular updates of progress and what has happened and what intends. It's very, very important to keep people informed that the ball has not been dropped. But also, drawing on from the previous panel, one of the things they did say was that accountability is understood in different contexts and means, to different people. Some people may not be interested in seeing someone go to court. What they may be interested in is to get some support. Perhaps dad was killed during the process, left a family of about 7, 8, 10 children. How do we support those young kids so that they grow up to be good men and women in society and they're able to contribute to the development of society? So I think in the context of prosecuting and investigating, we also need to factor in the other support. And lastly, just want to also draw on Lindsay's view to say, I think you've done a very great job as Myanmar as Gambia, to be able to help the people of Burma. Fortunately, I was in Burma in 2019 when the case was brought against Burma. And let me just share this quickly and wrap this up. What it looks like at the time when the state councillor, who is now disposed of, went to The Hague and defended the military, there was a rousing welcome when she came back to the country, and everyone thought that she did a great job, specifically those from the Burma ethnic group. Fast forward, in 2021, when we had the military takeover, which I was there and I remained there for 9 months, we saw a shift. And so today, people of the Burman ethnic group appreciates what Gambia has done in terms of taking up case against the military in support of the people of Rakhine. And today they believe that the people of Rakhine needs to be considered as citizens. They believe that justice needs to be provided for the people of Rakhine, and beyond just the people of Rakhine, other actors or other citizens or ethnic groups within Myanmar that continue to suffer from the mayhem of the military. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes the panel discussion. I don't know if you can permit me 5 minutes to summarize in Wolof, if that's acceptable. May I carry on? Right. Just pour tënka liñ doon wax fii nii rek si gàttal panel bi liñ doon discuss. Ñu ngi dooree woon waxtaan bi si naka Miss Safiñang moom mu ngi jógee si Ministry of Justice bi, so moom li mu doon leeral rek mooy tànka ak jéego yi réew mi jël pour make sure ne accountability bi ñoo wax nii am na, te moo nekkoon ne rek TRRC bi def na liggéeyam. bi mu joxee recommendation yi tamit am na luwaa yoo xam ne ñu ngi ko fi ab soxloon pour mun a isi accountability bi, waaye luwaa yooyu nekkuñ fi woon. So tax na be dañ waroon a def bindaay luwaay yuñ war a mun a taxawal pour accountability mun a am. Wax na ne nag government bi def nañ loolu noonu, waaye tamit si liggéey boobu noonu dañ am pour booloo ak ECOWAS pour ñu mun a taxawal bunta yoo xam ne dina mun a aate crimes of torture yi fi xewoon si nguur yaay Jammeh wi. Biñ jógee foofu noonu dem nañ tamit si African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies moom waxtaanam bi lim jublu woon mooy tamit ne soo gisee accountability emul si rek ne dañoo adresse li xewoon ci gannaaw waaye tamit pour fexe ba gis ne façon yooyu noonu du fi amati so waxtaan na si bunta yoo xam ne ñu ngi si région bi fii mooy dëkk yi ñu wër waaye tamit si mbootaay àdduna si tamit ñi ñoo wooye committee against torture ak Africa tamit am nañ beneen committee ñoom tamit boo xam ne liggéey boobu lañ dee taxawal ñaar yooyu noonu yëpp mu ngi wax ne nag ñu ngi fi te victimes yeeg réew mi yëpp war nañoo mun a xam naka la yan tànka la ñoo mun a jël pour dem si bunta yooyu noonu pour ñu saafara leen naxar yi ñu am si ñëwee si mbiri tooco waaye nag mu ne foog ñu am na institution yu fi nekk Human Rights Commission bi civil society organisation si yoo xam ne dinañ mun a dimbale victims pour ñu eega si bunta yooyu noonu biñ jógee si waxtaan boobu noonu tamit mislin si moom tamit waxtaan na si ne gis nañ ne léegi-léeg defkati tafaar yi dañ ne mun a def li ñoo def ba pare daw génn réew mi pour ne dañoo rëcca bu leen loxol waa jot waaye gis nañ ne si at yu lool jamono yu passé nii am na ñaari perpetrators yu fi nekkoon yoo xam ne kenn mu ngi woon Germany kenn a ngi woon Switzerland waaye parce que àdduna si fu mu nekk nii d'accord nañ ne jikko yi wala jëf yi ñuy def jëf yu ñaaw yoo xam ne la war nañoo mun a toppakaay fu ñu mun di dugga si àdduna si ñoom tam jël nañ jéego yooyu noonu ba gis ne aate nañ ñooñu teg leen si yoon tëj leen waaye tamit am na beneen bi xew si moom réewam muy Amérique mooy Michael Korea kiisam bi war a ñëw septembre bi waaye li moo wane si loolu moo nekk tamit ne Amérique mu ngi am ñoom tamit loi buñ taxawal boo xam ne koo xam ne dafa toocoon nit waaye defeewul ko si biir réew mi Amérique si boppam sax waaye si biti la ko defee su dawee laaxu ji foofu noonu loi boobu jox na leen doole pour ñu teg ko si yoon aate ko ñoom organisation bi moo liggéeyal ñu ngi support loolu noonu waaye li moo wax nag mooy ne ñoom xëj na seen doole si aate boobu noonu du sori parce que criminal prosecution la loolu lim tekki mooy ne nguur gi ñooy war a jël jéego yi pour aate ñooyu noonu so ñoom seen liggéey lim si doon mooy ne dinañ support victime yi waaye mu ne am na beneen loi bu nekk si réew mi tamit boo xam ne boobu dina leen dimbale ñoom ñu dimbale victime si ñu yóbbu seen case civil case boo xam ne ñoom tamit dinañ laajte pour ñu jox leen ndàmpaay si tooco biñ leen tooco boobu noonu mun nañ see dimbale victime si Gambia yi biñ jógee si loolu nag final panelist bi moom li mu waxtaanee mooy ne mbiri aate yi ñoo waxtaane yi ak jaarale nit yi si yooni loi perpetrators si yooni loi yëpp tamit dafa soxla ay dépenses yu bare bari bokk na si du ne xaalis rek sax waaye tamit technical capacity mooy pour jox yokka xam-xam wala yokka doole ñi amee wàllu loi bi pour nga xam ne dinañ mun a aate ñi aate boo xam ne dinañ leen mun a teg loxo mun leen a tëj wala def lu loi wax si ñoom waaye wax na ne tamit suñoo waxee fii aate accountability bi yëpp tamit li moo dégg si panel bi njëkkoon a ñëw mooy ne victimes yi am na ñoo xam ne aate yu rek tëj perpetrator bi soxalut leen ñu ngi am seen soxla yoo xam ne tamit réparation yoo xam ne moom moo leen gën a itteel ak seen famille yi so yooyu noonu tam mu ne waruñ koo faate si ñoo wax yi fi accountability nañ ko suuraale si mbir mi su ko defee mu gën a mun a njëriñ victime si daal si tënka loolu lañ waxtaanee fii nii ñu ngi leen di wax jërëjëf thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause for them. Once again, I think they talked about a lot of things and I guess some of the concerns that have been raised. Yeah, especially when it comes to accountability. Before we go any further, we have the likes of Anti-Fatu and Anti-Hour that are sleeping. So, Lumalendi Nyanwe, can we just stand up for a minute? I'd like to call Ms. Zainab from FLAG. We just do one icebreaker so we can just be awake. There's supposed to be salsa after this event, right? So we just want you to wake. I know the conversation has been very deep. We've talked about a lot of issues. We've talked about some legal terms. Zainab? Miss Sise? Mariama, can you please come do the icebreaker? Lead us. Thank you. Can we all stand up? It's just for a minute. Shake her. It's like a health break. You know, we've been sitting for a long time now, yeah? Just a couple of minutes. Yeah?
I don't think I did.
You don't think you need the other? Okay. Yeah.
Let's go down a bit. Up. Sideways. Up. Down. Sideways. Other way around. Are you awake or you want more? You are awake? Okay, let's continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just call on Miss Elizabeth to come do a quick presentation of the position paper. You have a mic there? Okay, I'll bring one for you. This one. Okay.
Hope that'll work. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. So yes, I will ask y'all to direct your attention this way now, so you can also see the screen. I'm Elizabeth. I am a legal fellow working with WAVE, and I am here to present our position paper on the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. It's come up a couple times so far already today, so I'm going to give you a little bit more background and details about the OPCAT, and then talk about why we think it's so important that Gambia ratify it. So to begin, as we've discussed a lot already today, June 26th, today, a very important day to be talking about these issues. And we want to reiterate our support for the fact that the Gambia has ratified the Convention Against Torture in 2018 and the 2023 domestic legislation that the Gambia has implemented. But it's not enough. There needs to be more to actually realize the goals of these human rights instruments. So this is a quick quote. Torture happens in secret, in closed places, out of sight. Opening places of detention to independent oversight is one of the most effective strategies to prevent torture and ill treatment. So taking this idea that torture is what happens in secret places where people can't see, the OPCAT then tries to shine a light on these places through the creation of an independent oversight mechanism. So the OPCAT is an implementation measure for the obligations that the Gambia already has, and it provides specific steps to take for the prevention of torture in the country. So one quick note to kind of explain something that Ms. Forster was just talking about, but the difference between the Convention Against Torture and the OPCAT, the optional protocol to this convention. So the Convention Against Torture, while it talks about prevention in 3 of its articles, its main focus is on redress, accountability, looking backwards. Whereas the optional protocol focuses on prevention of future instances of torture, which, as was just discussed, can also be a form of accountability. So I also gave a list here of some illustrative examples of places where torture may occur. As Ms. Forster was talking about, places of detention, prisons, detention centers, police stations, things like that. So there's two different mechanisms that the OPCAT would require the Gambia to work with. So the first is the National Preventive Mechanism, and the second is the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture. I'll talk about both of those. So first, the National Preventive Mechanism, which has a variety of different functions, but I'll just briefly name the four main functions. The first, visiting. As Ms. Forrester actually mentioned, you can have both announced and unannounced visits. And the National Preventive Mechanism, as well as the SPT, need to be allowed access to the entire institutions and to be allowed to conduct confidential interviews so they can actually see what's happening on the ground. Next, they have an advisory role. So they produce recommendations based on the things that they see in their visit to produce reports for the government and allow them to have this advisory role. Next, they also have an education role. So that's awareness raising, capacity building, building out curriculum for schools and for security sector reform, which is another part of reparations in the form of institutional reform. Then fourth and finally, the cooperation mechanism. So they work both cooperatively with the state government itself, as well as with other countries' national preventive mechanisms, as well as with the UN and the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture. So then the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture is a UN body of experts coming from various regions and backgrounds. And their two key roles are, again, a visiting function. So again, both the announced and unannounced visits and needing to be allowed access, confidential interviews, as well as supporting and advising the NPMs and working collaboratively with them in these goals. And I listed here some of the guiding principles for the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture. Most importantly, again, confidentiality. So ensuring that the interviews they do are confidential. There's no sort of retribution that would occur for someone having spoken to them, as well as objectivity, impartiality, and again, importantly, a theme of collaboration and cooperation rather than condemnation. So their goal is to really support each state party to the optional protocol in achieving these goals that we all have, rather than condemning countries if they're not yet up to the standards they would like to see. So then, last bit here is just about why we think it's so important that the Gambia ratify this. So I separated our main points into three different aspects. So the first, as an accountability measure, we are here today talking about accountability. And we believe that OPCAT is a form of accountability. And in its prevention, looking forward mechanism, it's actually also a form of reparations. As we just talked about, the basic guidelines and principles on the right to reparations, there are 5 different, which is the guarantee of non-repetition. That is prevention. So by ratifying a mechanism that is to ensure the prevention of torture, this is a form of reparations. The Gambian government, in their white paper, in the aftermath of the TRRC, calls reparations, quote, an important component of the Gambia's healing process. On the earlier panel today, we talked about how accountability is for victims and for the country as a whole. And so when we think about reparations, we can think about the non-repetition as being important for both the healing process of victims and survivors, but also for the country as a whole. Secondly, by having independent oversight and monitoring mechanisms, it promotes transparency and restores the people's faith that the government is willing to do something and take a stand against torture. and be more than just words and really commit to this. And restores community trust, as well as when we think about being able to have these unannounced visits, it reduces the rates of corruption and abuse that may be happening in these. This is that when we think about, for example, prisons and reducing the potential for torture in prisons, then allows people, once they are released from prison, it reduces the recidivism rate. So it reduces the likelihood that they may commit another crime once they're released. The better they are treated while incarcerated. And that builds a safer society for everyone. Okay, very last slide, I promise. I know now I'm fully standing in the way between you and dinner, but finally, the facilitating international cooperation and improving Gambia's image on the world stage as a leader in talking about. The Gambia has already stood out as a leader in so many ways, like in their case against Myanmar. And here's another opportunity for them to take that role and be an important leader, and also to keep up with the other countries. So it's not showing up so well. So let me go back to this other map here. But yeah, so this map here, which is actually not fully updated, it's from a few years ago, but the states in blue are ones that have ratified the optional protocol for the Convention Against Torture. And actually, in the past couple of years, all of these countries have actually become dark blue. So they have all ratified it. And so we encourage Gambia to then join the international stage and the other West African states that have committed to the prevention of torture. So I wanted to point out that map. But finally, they can benefit from the concrete advice and the knowledge that other states' parties have gained from having already ratified it and created these NPMs and worked with the SPT, to then use that here in the Gambia to strengthen and improve that international cooperation among all the other countries that are also similarly committed to preventing torture now and forever into the future. So that's why WAVE thinks it's incredibly important for the Gambia to ratify the optional protocol for the Convention Against Torture, and we especially encourage it on this historic day. And we will be presenting this position paper to the government and really encourage them to do so. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Jerry and Jeff, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We'll now just quickly move to another collective meeting by Estate Musane. In 2 minutes. Okay. Whilst we wait for Mr. Sane to come, do we have any questions for our panelists that were here before? Both for panel 1 and panel 2. Anybody, do you have any questions? On accountability. You don't have questions? So we're all okay. We're all fine with the pace that the government is going with in terms of accountability. Okay. MOJ, take your time then. The victims are okay. They don't have any complaints. Yes. You have yeah. Your name, where you're from, and your correction.
Gentleman or a mic. Okay, assalamu alaikum. Nke to mo bitu nyabalati mbota ba hotele. Nte be diam la fanna be na wala be kala na député wolti because nta gamira victime will be député la nyante nyafita la député bun kono. Katu ko député fengo mi ya lon ko anata pri fengo la kola isoke emergency bare député bun ko wala how many months I will député bun kono because ñu wék nga biri last year abe député bun kono bare ñaka sala le ye emergency ke la fenko la ila moto kola ni masa kunda fana interest nata na bari député la interest lo moti ka fen sojele ke emergency ko wala to la pepe ñata wala ya landi alon député ñantaro ne la ko to le molle be ko ma ñim victime bi daga be député la ñim député bun kono bi victime la ya tin bi geto bi because député jama bi je bi victime la miti be to la victime ya ñina tawla badam victime be jam musul anin din newol ito ñata fere kala wol ñaafita because ci salon ko victime wol mil ya lon ko fama banta wole bal banta bayo lombi to la ñanta wol ñaafita la bi man sa kunna to ko ma fola wala ko because wol bela interest la no kam because wol man ko victime be keri wol ta victime wala de although man sa kunna hafo bi jël mi ya lon ko victime wala mi ba bi wol bela interest be bari to ni dingol ibita kan kule ila jararo so ne ate bulu le balu nya so na te bulu ko bada victime hafo be ni aje luwasla le siate kono adu victime hafo be je musol lom fano ka kele suba ye guliye dimba ya fili ko mayta yeta anyini be miyan ko ba sama de dimba ya le ndanga jamana miyan ko dingo famanta ta kan school amanke fenti fami ya lon ko miyan ko mele bol wori mele ibe men do male maso no mo ne sey karam ko mi ron dingo ay bam so député la ñanta ma ko la ñaafita anu be masakunda da ni la masakunda ntol malla maral modam manati bi ne ba fula masakunda be mo tole bal ko ma kan tole mara so ata fula be tan la je pour fa dam mangoliya mil bal ko ma alma wolte moti wota keno la ntol bal dani la minna alim fanan ko ma fela alim fanan jubi okay Allah baraka baki